Ladies and gentlemen, very excited to bring to you on Mixed Mental Arts, Michael Shermer, whose newest book, Heavens on Earth, The Scientific Search for the Afterlife, Immortality, and Utopia. If you haven't read that, and if you haven't read How We Believe, Science, Skepticism, and the Search for God, you are remiss. And I guess if I were to describe Shermer in person, I'd say he's a glossy, young Mediterranean bull. He's a barrel-chested man with shaved legs because he cycles a lot. You clearly stepped off the beaches of Sardinia. I'm like, what's with the Italian fisherman over here who lifts weights? So he's way more athletic than I've ever given you credit for. I thought you were an egghead who sat there and just read all day, and then you're standing there. I went, what a handsome son of a bitch.
I actually read while I'm cycling. I do audiobooks.
Do you really?
I do
podcasts
too. And I was listening to some Dave Rubin on the drive over here.
Mm-hmm.
Like I drove down from Santa Barbara where I live, and so I parked at Neptune's Net, where all the surfers go, and I rode up and just did a bunch of the mountain climbs there.
So did you actually bike? You didn't bike from Santa Barbara?
No. I drove down, parked, and then I got to go teach after this. So yeah. Anyway, so I try to ride every day. Just working out's good. Keeps the blood flowing through the brain.
Well, you're a very, very important voice, and I stumbled across just your magazine a long time ago, and it was because we live in a time where one of the biggest problems is you don't necessarily know what the truth is. And or it's easy to kind of buy into the narrative because you'll hear something, for example, like wheatgrass is really good for you,
right?
And everybody does it, and then you do it, and you go, I feel pretty good. I think my blood is oxygenated. I remember somebody's like, it oxygenates your blood, and without even thinking, I'd always go, yeah, it actually oxygenates your blood, so it gives you more endurance. Meanwhile, Ben Goldacre, who was in Bad Science, was like, well, the problem with that is that you need sunlight and chlorophyll, and that'll create oxygen. I don't think you want sunlight in the inside of your body. So that kind of violates the first principle. And but anyway, your books and your talks and your interviews have always been sort of a breath of fresh air to me.
Problem with all those kinds of claims, and I'm open to them working, is that you have an N of one. It's just you. And you try something, you take the wheatgrass or whatever, and then you go work out or something. It's like, wow, I felt good.
Yeah.
Yeah, but maybe it's because you had a pork chop last night or not, whatever the latest diet is supposed to be. Now meat's okay again. All right, good. Or you slept an extra 2 hours, and maybe it's the sleep. So you can't control those variables on yourself.
Right.
So that's why we have to have science. That's why we have to have...
Or I like to look at what works for cultures. Now, you're clearly from Sardinia, and so I'm going to go with whatever you're doing.
Okay.
Yeah. But there are certain...
Shermer, clearly Sardinian.
Shermer. He's from the Jewish or whatever.
I am 1/4 Greek, actually.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, and German. And
I
I have German and Greek.
There you go.
And I'm married to a German woman.
Oh, you are?
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah.
So you've got a whole mix. You're a mutt.
She's quite staggered. She just came here a couple of years ago to be with me, if you can believe that. And she's amazed at the puritanical, sex-obsessed American culture.
We were just talking about
she says, on the news, they have no problem showing dead bodies here and there in war and stuff, but a nipple gets shown on TV. Oh my God. And it's, the whole American culture falls apart. It's like,
sex has always been dangerous.
In Europe, they're much more casual about these things.
We were just talking to Chris Ryan about that, who wrote Sex at Dawn. Right. Sex is just loaded, man, in this country. It's so dangerous now to even talk about anything.
Yeah.
And in a way, I feel like sex used to be dangerous because of pathogens, because of diseases we couldn't control, syphilis and for that matter, gonorrhea and chlamydia and all these things, and then AIDS, of course. And now I feel like that's all been replaced with the idea that you could be accused of something on both sides. By the way, you have women politicians who are being accused of they had an inappropriate, raunchy conversation.
Right.
One congressman has been hugging too much. They call him Huggy Bear, and now he's in trouble in Sacramento. This is getting fucking crazy, man.
Okay.
It's getting crazy.
Yeah.
Because Hunter and I always talk about the fact that Americans tend to have a hard time kind of, looking at the broad spectrum of the human experience and emotions. We tend to be, you've either got to be a pervert or a saint, and there's no in between. We tend to be very binary.
And they also tend to strip away context, right? Yeah. So even Huggy Bear, right? Okay, well, maybe Huggy Bear is like just friendly and believes in hugs, and he comes from some culture where that's okay. maybe the reason why Huggy Bear is doing it, like what's on Huggy Bear's face when he's doing the hug, right? Is there a little up and down rubbing during the hug, right?
That would be me. That would be me.
That would be you. But so it depends with Huggy Bear, right? Like how is the huggy being done? What is the hugging for? And Americans, just because they're so atomistic, context always gets stripped away. And like we were talking about with even testosterone replacement, right? It becomes this single variable and we pay no attention to what is going to happen in the rest of the body.
Yep, you got to have the full context for sure. That's why people like Chris Ryan, I like him because he brings more international, cross-cultural context to these things. You know, if you're just an American, you've never left, this is all you know. You know, I mentioned my wife from Europe. Europeans are very different about this, but if you go to South America or Spain or Africa, you know, it's all very different.
Yeah.
And their kinds of attitudes about sex is very different. So clearly biology plays a big role, but so does culture.
Yeah.
So yeah, all this stuff, it's, you know, here's part of the problem too, is I think because we're so tribal and groups tend to purge, they go on these moral crusades where they purge anyone who's not the purest of the, whatever our category is here. So, you know, feminism is sort of going through this purging now. It did this back in the 70s as well. Carol Tavris points this out that, you know, she was a second wave feminist, that all these groups go through this. Marxists had their purges. Who's the pure Marxist? Ayn Rand supporters, objectivists, they went through purges. You know, oh, you smoked the wrong cigarette. You like the wrong music. That's not a true objectivist music. The libertarians have gone through this. You know, now I think Republicans are, you know, like split over Trump. Like,
well, somebody said this on Sam Harris, I think, with David Frum. If somebody is skeptical of global warming, you can usually tell where they stand on gun control and everything else because they're towing the party line.
That's right. And that's true with any of those. If you tick the box for, you know, I'm pro-life, then I predict, I know where you stand on guns. What? These have nothing to do with each other.
Nothing to do with each other.
The fact that we're so predictable that way is kind of disturbing. It'd be nice if we were single issue people. Like, don't put me in the box. Just ask me, what are you on guns, capital punishment, abortion, things like that.
But that ties into what you do as a skeptic. That ties into sort of being responsive to evidence on a case-by-case basis, right? Isn't that
That's right. So, like, the problem with the whole climate change thing is it got coupled to politics, mainly because of Al Gore's film Inconvenient Truth. I mean, that really put it on the map because he's so identified with left politics that, okay, so climate change is a left thing.
Yeah.
And we know that those lefties hate capitalism and free trade and so forth. So, and they're a bunch of commie socialists. So that's what that means. So when a conservative today anybody hears, you know, climate change, they immediately associate all those other words. So we have to decouple.
Yeah, my father
those.
will call you a warmist.
A warmist.
And he'll do it. He'll do it in a very syrupy, condescending way. Well, I mean, you warmists tend to be, and he'll couple that with an alarmist, and you're like,
that's right. Well, the other side, lukewarmists are those like Matt Ridley and I guess me, that climate change is real and human caused, but it probably is not going to be as catastrophic as we've been worried about, or people say, and that we'll be able to find. I call this the Elon Musk solution. You know, just find technological, cool solutions that make $1 zillion for green technology people and IPOs that are doing this, and startups, and then, you know, let that be the solution. I think that'll happen.
Yeah. So much of what I appreciate about your skepticism, as opposed to some people's skepticism, is that it comes out of a recognition that all our brains do this. Right? The human brain, the believing brain, it has this negativity bias. It has this tendency to form these tribal belief systems. And, you know, a lot of these beliefs become about belonging. Like you go along with or against evolution because it confers belonging in your tribe.
Right. And your book, Heaven on Earth, is it seems essentially about that. The theme of the book is to say that technology may have taken the place of these different, you know, sort of religions that have the truth. But in fact, if you look at the new religions that are tied up with technology, Kurzweilists, etc., the mechanism is still the same. The brain is still working the same way. We still are in love with immortality.
Totally. Absolutely.
So we're just as religious, aren't we?
Well, when I went to the Singularity Summit in New York City a few years ago, where Ray was the keynote speaker, he's the main guy. You know, it was like being back in church. It's like, oh my God, this guy, you know, and we are the first generation to live forever. It's like we are the chosen. It's
I
us.
read the Singularity is Near. I mean, it was astonishing.
And I like him. I mean, he, you know, it's exciting to think about the future. It's like Michio Kaku, the future of humanity. We're going to Elon Musk. We're going to Mars. Okay, we're going to Mars. You know, this is all cool stuff. But hang on, slow down, living forever. Wait a minute. And they asked me, Shermer, don't you want to live to be 500? I go, look, just get me to 80 without cancer, 90 without Alzheimer's.
I'm right with you.
Get me to 100 without being on a bed, on a morphine drip somewhere. I just want to be healthy and strong and cognitively aware for another year. And if it keeps going, fine. But this idea of we're going to shoot for out there, wait, you might miss a bunch of stuff here.
Well, because we're defined by our limitations. I mean, that's kind of what it is to be a human, isn't it? Isn't that what it is to be anything? Is that we are as defined by our limitations, more defined by our limitations, maybe than anything else. What are you going to do with the time that you have? And you know that your time is going to run out. That is the essence of what it is to be human.
Right.
William F. Buckley was interviewed when he was about 85, and he said something really neat. He said, I think the worst enemy to an old person is young optimistic doctors. And he said, you get tired of life. There is a joy in giving your family joy and stuff. But at the end of the day, I've done so much and I've done everything I wanted to. And he was ready to go on. It was kind of a cool way of looking at it. I'd love to get to that point.
Well, I start Heavens on Earth with something of a thought experiment. The chapter on why we die is like, how long would you like to live? There's surveys on this, and most people say, early 80s or so. They pretty much give whatever the current lifespan is, average lifespan, which is low 80s now. And but if I fast forwarded you there to the week before and said, okay, next Monday, what? Would you like another week? Yeah, I'll take another week.
Yeah.
How about another month? I'll take another month. Then we go a month forward. Would you like another year? Yeah, I'll take another year.
Oh, yeah.
And there's at no point, you just keep going. Are you going to go, you know what? I think tomorrow I'll just check out. No, I mean, I'm not talking about being severely depressed or you're on death's door anyway.
Even then, though, you see with cancer patients, they say, this medication could give you an extra 2.5 months.
Yeah, they'll do it.
Well, if I got children, that's worth it to me. I'll do it.
Right,
it might be now, but I'll do it.
But that doesn't mean we will live forever. But it's an interesting thought experiment. I'm thinking about that now. Then the rest of that chapter is on why we have to die in the first place. So it's an interesting problem because we see, like with infants and children. I have a 21-month-old son. When he gets cut, you could practically watch it heal. Mm-hmm. It's so fast. He's so strong and healthy. And why can't our cells just keep doing that?
Yeah.
Now I'm 63 and my cells don't do that. It takes me a lot longer to recover from injuries and so on. Why should that be? Well, okay, so two reasons. One, and they're both involved in natural laws. So second law of thermodynamics, entropy, is the first law of life. That is all. The purpose of life is to push back against entropy. From cells to our body, organs to our whole bodies, we're always pushing back against the gradient of things running down and running out. So working out is a way of pushing back against, things running down. Food intake is giving you energy because the energy is just going to dissipate. And so on. Everything we do is that. And then second, natural selection basically allocates precious resources toward getting genes into the next generation. So we need you to be strong and healthy until your kids are of reproductive age, and then they get their kids to reproductive age. So you're useful as a grandparent. Say after that, the benefits fall off pretty quickly. So natural selection, I'm saying it as if somebody's up there. The Secretary of Energy is allocating these resources. Of course, no such thing is happening. But natural selection kind of operates that way. So at some point, it's better to put the limited resources of nature into infants than the 80, 90-year-old guy to keep him going to 150. We don't need you after, say, about 80 or so.
Yeah.
And so this is the problem with all the aging remedies. We were talking about that. They target one little thing. Okay. Yeah. But it's like 100 different things fall apart at the same time. At about mid to late 80s, it just, the curve just drops off.
The machine
like that.
Just starts to break down.
Right.
Yeah.
Even, because I've been an athlete all my life, my older friends, cycling friends, they're going. It's like, oh crap, this could happen to me. Jack LaLanne, he's working out like a madman all the way up to the end. And
96, I think he died, right?
Yeah. So you can't, we're not going to stop it. Now, there are companies like Calico that Google owns. They've invested like $1 billion in defeating aging. It's an engineering problem. So I write about these guys.
Aubrey de Grey talked. We had
Aubrey de Grey. You had Aubrey on?
Oh, yeah.
You know what I like about him?
Seven different
the 7
ways
things,
that the cell breaks down.
Okay, but the thing is, you talk to aging scientists, he hasn't done any of them. We're not close to any one of the 7 yet.
No.
He's on record saying the first person to live 1,000 years is alive today. Okay, well, good. I hope it happens, but come on.
Yeah.
But also, Rudolph II invested a lot of money in alchemy because he was hoping for the elixir of life.
Right.
So always wealthy people, and obviously the first Chinese emperor, wealthy people have always had the money and they've always wanted to live forever, and they've always invested it. Now,
my buddy said this. My buddy was on a boat with, I think it was Lorne Michaels, and I mean some really big rich people who had $1 billion or more, and they were all in their 60s, and they'd done everything they wanted to do, and the only thing they wanted to talk about was what could get them to live longer. I mean, literally.
Really?
Oh yeah. What supplement is that?
Yes.
What? How? What? There's a new diet. I mean, what is that?
Curcumin. Oh.
Oh yeah. Turmeric. Yeah.
Turmeric is. Yeah.
Do you as a skeptic, do you take any supplements?
I don't take anything. No.
You don't
No. I'm still trying to figure out what's the right thing to eat.
Me too.
I've talked to leading diet experts on all sides of this. You know, like when I walk into Starbucks in the morning, so I get my coffee. Should I get the oatmeal or the egg and bacon sandwich?
Yeah.
And I can't get a straight answer.
I know, because I don't know if fat. I do know that when I eat a lot of protein, I feel a little sluggish. So I don't know if it's good for me.
Yeah, but the oatmeal, you know, I get the oatmeal. Of course, they throw in the brown sugar and the nuts and the berries and all that stuff.
Insulin spikes.
I get the insulin spike, and then I just want to go to sleep like an hour later. Yes. That's not good either.
I know.
Matt Fitzgerald has a great book called Diet Cults. And I mean, that's really what these are. There's a series of competing cargo cults, and each of them promises, if you follow our rituals, you will achieve immortality.
There is a science. Gary Taubes has written some good stuff on that. There is a science.
Yeah, but there are a lot of people who have a problem with Taubes.
Well, it's because Taub just really basically eats meat and cheese. I mean, Gary will be like, not a lot of evidence about greens. And it's like, Gary, I mean, a little, we got to get him on the podcast but he's like, he's such a skeptic. He's like, it's not a lot of, I know you could eat salad, but if you want. But, so there people that are, I again will err on. I'll look at the blue zones and I'll try to mimic what those, because they have good strong bonds. They don't retire. They stay active. And they eat a wide variety of things, mostly plant-based.
I mean, this idea of a paleo diet, we've done stuff on this in Skeptic. What is that? It's whatever the people had. Who are you talking about? You're talking about the Inuits. They're eating whale blubber.
100%.
and meat, okay? Yeah. And then if you're talking to someone in South America, someone in Africa, it varies widely. The paleo diet is the seafood diet. You see it, you eat it.
Yeah, but there's a cognitive appeal to the paleo diet, right? Like there's this appeal that if we go back to the way that our ancestors lived, right?
Pre-agriculture.
Yeah, but it's
pure natural.
But the reason why certain stories trend is because they have some sort of cognitive or emotional appeal, rather than that they necessarily are a good fit for what the actual data is.
Right. Yep. So I went into a health food store in Santa Barbara yesterday, and I ordered a shake thing, and I wanted only GMO ingredients. and I said, and I want extra gluten. They're like, what?
That's great.
No one's ever asked for extra gluten.
Most of us are gluten tolerant. Totally. Like I did my genome, and if you have celiac disease, it's different. But
if you have celiac disease, you fucking know it.
Yeah,
that's right.
But eating is a belief system. It's become, again, in this country,
it's
the
like
United
a religion.
States, it's a fucking belief system.
Yeah, when you go into Whole Foods, it's like going into church. It's like a spiritual thing. Like, oh, I got my pure this and that. And you can see. So that's like.
So is CrossFit. CrossFit's a church.
It is.
Sure. I mean,
of course.
There
are many ways to be saved, and don't you want to be part of the elect?
Yeah, at least with CrossFit, you got a nice high tight ass and good traps.
Yeah, you might also have rhabdomyolysis or whatever the fuck it is.
Well, when you do CrossFit, this is my impression of every CrossFit athlete. Ready? Every CrossFit athlete. Just coming back after an injury. It's the first time in 10 months. without fail. Nah, just my neck and my back and my shoulder and it's like, all right, dude, a little moderation. Moderation is a huge. We don't use moderation enough.
I think I mix it up. I have a steak now and then. My wife and I had burgers last night.
Yeah.
But for lunch I had a kale salad. Okay, so sometimes I have bacon and eggs for breakfast. Sometimes I have the oatmeal.
Yeah.
I don't know what else to do other than just kind of. I
think you're doing it right. It seems to me that you look great, so you seem to be on the right track.
Bryan paid you the highest compliment possible, which is he called you Sardinian. So if you're looking Sardinian, you must be doing something right.
What is the Sardinian diet? That's probably a lot of seafood. Seafood's pretty good, I think.
I think that we can agree that sleep, water, good sleep, water,
not too much, not sugar, no sugar.
Good relationships, not a lot of sugar.
Right.
Those are probably the things we can agree on. Yeah,
that's right.
Don't live on dough. On raw dough and sugar all day and 4 hours of sleep and coffee.
Right.
You're going to feel better if you do the other thing.
It'll be interesting to see what Elon sends the first colony to Mars with. What food will they take?
Yeah.
Not to mention, it'll get even more interesting here with this becomes kind of science fiction, but what kind of government will they set up in Mars? What kind of an economic exchange system? Will they have religion? Will they bother with churches?
I think we will because, we always talk about this on the podcast. I think your book touches on this, that human beings are religious regardless. They will find a way. I mean, communism, Yuval Harari does a great job in Sapiens about this. You know, you say what you will, you can call it an ideology, but communism was a religion.
Absolutely.
And you had your clergy who were very familiar with the Communist Manifesto, and they would go and check the piety of all the soldiers to make sure that they were good communists.
Right.
And it goes back to what you were saying before. You have to purge. You have to purify. We had re-education camps, and some people like Paul Pot get a little carried away. If you've got glasses, it means you're an intellectual and you're probably beyond redemption. So we've got to get rid of you if you don't mind, and probably your whole family too, because it's less messy. But I'm always amazed at how skepticism is not only met with derision and hostility a lot of times, especially if you're dealing with somebody's belief system. And you talk about this, Hunter, is like religion is important. I have respect for religion. I'm not religious, but it gives people meaning, and that's very important to people.
Well, and I think the point is that, what I loved about The Believing Brain and then Heavens on Earth is that sometimes when people are trying to be skeptics, what they're really trying to do is pretend that they're above human nature. And the reality is that we can't escape this believing brain. Like we believe counterfactual scenarios. Even just now when you were talking about, I'm talking like there's some man above that, is in the Department of Energy. Like one of the most powerful conversations I ever had was with this guy who was Maori. And he was saying, people listen to us personify the mountains and the rivers and all of that, and they think that it's some woo-woo spiritual thing. And it's like, no, it's just a good workaround for human psychology. Like when you turn mountains into characters, into people, you take care of them because you have a relationship with them. And so, I think, obviously Dawkins has to do the same thing. He has to personify evolution as the blind watchmaker so that our minds can wrap around what we're talking
metaphorically,
about.
Yes. Yeah. I think there's some truth to that. And all religions, almost all religions have dietary restrictions and rules and laws about that. So we shouldn't be surprised that secularists, again, walking into Whole Foods, they kind of have a sense of this. There's something holy about this. My sacred temple, my body, and what I put in my sacred temple has to be sacred and pure. So it's the same psychology going on. I call this in Heavens on Earth, Afterlife for atheists. The search for immortality. The Ray Kurzweils, they're atheists, but they still want to, as I put it from Woody Allen, I don't want to live on in my work. I want to live on in my apartment. That's how do we do that? But did you ever see that documentary film on Ray Kurzweil called Transcendent Man?
Yes.
I mean, he talks about what an uplifting idea this is, but it was kind of morose and dark.
He misses his father.
He wants to bring his father back.
Yeah.
And he just kind of looks like he's just really down on life. And I'm thinking about death a lot.
He takes about $1 million worth of pills, I think, a year for real.
I did this back in the 80s when I was bike racing. I took a lot of vitamin and mineral supplements. I had this quasi-doctored person I'm working with. And you just piss it out. It's just like orange-green urine. Yeah. It's like, well, there it goes.
Well, because the question is when your body has the amount it needs, okay, then will adding more actually make a difference, right?
It goes, right.
And that always made sense to me.
And Ray, I see him once in a while at TED Talk TED events, and he looks his age. He looks okay, fine. He looks great, but that he looks his age. Same thing with Deepak Chopra. He wrote that book. He's a friend of mine now. He wrote that book, Ageless Body, Ageless Mind, or whatever it was. Quantum healing and all that. Like when he was 30. And he looked young, and now he's like 70 something, and he looks 70 something. It's like, dude,
I had a great kind of debate with him.
You did?
We were waiting for a table at a restaurant called Ashe, and he was with his family. And I had heard him debate with a bunch of religious scholars. And Deepak kind of has this tendency to say everything is everything, and there's nothing is wrong, and everything is right. And I said, the problem, and my mother said the funniest thing in the world. She came up and I said, Mom, this is Deepak Chopra. And she said, you know what? I contemplating reading your book and practicing meditation, but I chose antidepressants instead. He's the greatest fucking line ever. And he laughed and he said, I'm going to send you some tapes. And he did. He wrote her name down and he said it. So I have a great deal of, I love the guy. But what I said to him was, I said, you can't say that we don't draw lines as human beings. We do.
Right, of course.
We define ourselves on the lines we're willing to fight for. if I have children in a school system and they start teaching me that intelligent design is on the same level as the theory of evolution, I'm going to have a problem with that.
Right.
I'm not everything is everything, and not all beliefs are on the same
That's
playing
right.
field.
Absolutely.
And this goes back to being a skeptic. You can't say that. Some things you have to fight for. Some things you have to say, the evidence ain't there, man.
Right.
I'm sorry it's not convenient to your belief system or how you feel, and I'm sorry it threatens your sense of well-being, but
And the whole reason why we have a mind that can draw lines is because that was necessary to our survival in the evolutionary past. Like all of these features that exist in our brain, like you do such a good job in The Believing Brain talking about negativity bias, right? We have a negativity bias and it evolved for a reason.
Mm-hmm. There's that
That's
rustling
right, because there's a lot of
leaves.
things that can take us out of the gene pool pretty rapidly. And so it pays to pay more attention to the negative things than the positive things. The most positive things that happen in our lives are incremental. You hardly notice them. You know, another day without a heart attack, you don't even think about your heart until something goes wrong. And in that sense, you know, pains are there for a reason.
Right.
Our negative emotions are there for a very good reason, and so you should pay attention to those. This is why economists talk about loss aversion. Losses hurt twice as much. Losses hurt twice as much as gains feel good. So to get somebody to invest in something, the payoff has to be about double what the loss would feel to your bottom line or your budget or whatever. And this is true for, like negative tweets hurt twice as much as positive tweets feel good. So that's kind of a way to put it.
It's if you want to box and really learn, you've got to get hit in the head, because every time you throw a right, if you get caught on the right side of your head with a hook, you're going to learn to throw and bring it back. You're going to be reminded that the only way to actually learn how to box for real or fight is fighting and getting hit back. You can't do it on mitts.
Right.
You can't.
Right.
You can't be theoretical about it. You have to get in the ring, be really nervous, get hit, get hurt, or at least learn, and then your body will react to, you'll protect yourself. And then the idea is to be able to like protect yourself and also be cognizant and keep your eyes open when you're getting hit. Good luck. But I mean, it's kind of a great metaphor.
I don't think I'll test that one.
Yeah.
At this point in my life.
Yeah, but loss aversion is something that we.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
that is a really good learning tool.
So the middle two chapters in Heavens on Earth on utopias and dystopias and progress and regress and all that. So the negativity bias is powerful in there in terms of like how we look at the future versus the past, how we tend to think there was a golden age back then. If we could only get back to the good old days, the 1950s or the 1850s or
the
the
fundamentalist Islam getting back to the 15th century. When that was the golden age of.
Yeah, and it's all it's ridiculous. The 1950s, it was dreck. It was terrible. And I try to remind my conservative friends, the tax rate was 90%. You don't want to go back to the 1950s.
I didn't know that. I've heard that before.
So much of what I was thinking about when I was
the upper tax rates. Yeah.
But when you have this sort of rose-colored past, right? This idea like. I don't know if you've read Joe Henrich's The Secret of Our Success. It's a book I talk about all the time. But our evolutionary toolkit, right? Our cultural toolkit is designed to help us survive in a particular environment. And, mutations in our cultural toolkit, like mutations in our genome, are generally bad. And so it seems like there is some sort of evolved mechanism within us that if things aren't working in some way, our default assumption is to puritanize and strip out anything that might be foreign. So, and it seems like that's a lot of what's happening around the world across cultures. People are freaked out, things aren't working, and then there are all these puritanical movements, whether it's the feminists or the conservatives or the Islam or the atheists.
Have gone through this purging stuff. Are you a Dawkins atheist or a Hitchens atheist or a nice atheist or agnostic or it's like, guys, we are a tiny little. We need a big tent.
I know.
And
well, Sam, I want to touch on that because Sam Harris the other day on a podcast was saying that he doesn't believe in free will, and he was debating. I think it was Eric Weinstein and Ben Shapiro on this. And Ben Shapiro is an Orthodox Jew, and so he believes in free will. What do you? Because the problem with the way Sam Harris was framing this was that if there's no free will, then what he's really saying is that we don't know that even the choices we make to learn Chinese, even though effort exists, so you can't learn Chinese by just hoping the will takes over, but your impulse to actually get up and open a book on the Chinese language or hire a teacher is not your choice. We don't know where that originated from. Okay. It's a very bleak way. Sam probably uses the word rational in every other sentence. His God is the great God of rationality.
Right.
And I think that's dangerous, because then I don't know. And I think he's, but the idea would be that we need to come up with a new form of sort of religion, a new form of humanity, where rationality, what's the most rational way to live, right? Problem is that can be hijacked by the wrong people. It's very rational to say, these people over here who are half dead or not as quote unquote smart maybe shouldn't get the resources that our gifted children should get, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, this is the flaw of utilitarian philosophy, that you sacrifice the few to the many, the greatest good for the greatest number, greatest happiness for the greatest number, whatever. It's too easy to then rationalize. Well, I'll just kill the one to save the five. The famous trolley experiment, right? So you flip the switch, kill the one worker to save the five workers. But you wouldn't do this if you were a physician with one healthy patient in the waiting room and you had 5 dying patients in the ERs there. You wouldn't go out and harvest his organs and kill him. We don't want to live in a world like that. So the rights of an individual trumps the utilitarian calculus of saving a greater number of people. And the other problem is that this is the basis of genocide. We can just get rid of these Jews that are preventing the pure race, or if we can get rid of the Hutus or the Tutsis, I forget which one was which. All genocides are based on that. Sacrifice
the
the
Nazis
few.
were very rationally trying to purify, create a perfect race.
Right.
But also they
Eugenics.
made all sorts of assumptions, right? The Nazis had a view that somehow this came from blood, right? Which
blood
is
and soil.
Blood and soil, right?
Yeah,
And which is also part of what you talk about as well.
That's right. Yeah, the blood and soil thing, that's just one element there. But the ultimate problem with utopia is this idea that somebody can determine the ideal society. We're going to create a heaven on earth right here, the perfect political system, the perfect economic system. And the problem is there is none. What's the right way to live? There's no answer to that, because what you want is different from what I want. So we have to have a system that's flexible, that allows us to do this within certain guidelines. And
to stop you for a second, very important distinction there, because when you talk about the perfect man, the one thing that I appreciate about Christianity is that it recognizes that you are flawed, that you will never be, you will never be Christ, but you can reach for it. It's kind of like Plato's forms. You'll never see what a perfect triangle or a perfect horse or a perfect man is, but you can imagine it. And if you can imagine it, you can reach for it. You know that you are going to fail. That's built into the model, but at least you can reach for your best self.
Yeah, that's right. So I instead of utopia, I aim for protopia, which is Kevin Kelly's word for incremental progress. Tomorrow's a little bit better than today, and this is how we've gotten to where we've gotten. We've experienced a lot of progress over the centuries, protopian wise, not utopia. Intellectuals like one big idea, a big theory that explains everything, and very little of life works that way.
That's right.
So this is always most of these utopian schemes are by intellectuals or people that think, I know the answer, and then they implement it, and almost always catastrophically. And
then when their implementation doesn't work, they think that the people are bad and the people are the problem. And, because you're getting in the way of my tidy theory.
That's right. Yeah. Now back to the free will thing. Let me just make a comment about that. So I'm what's called a compatibilist. So you could be a libertarian free will, not politically, but that real free will, sort of like maybe Ben Shapiro thinks. And a determinist, which Sam argues, and quite a few philosophers argue that. But surveys show, for example, there was one I cite from 2010 or 2011 of, I don't know, it was like 3,600 professional professors of philosophy, graduate students, people that do this for a living. And the majority were compatibilists. Compatibilists acknowledged we live in a determined universe. The Big Bang, cause and effects, laws of nature, all true. But that our choices, whatever we mean by it, so we run into a problem with words and language. Yeah. What do you mean by so our choices are part of the causal net, but we are making active choices within the determined universe. So like if I know that future Michael Shermer in a couple hours is going to be hungry, I should eat a little bit now so that I don't go for the chocolate chip cookies when I get to Chapman, because there's this place that has great cookies. So I can kind of predict, I know what he's going to do. Like I'm talking about a different person.
Yeah.
And so being self-aware, then you alter the choice matrix. Okay.
Otherwise there would be no such thing as life mastery, and you can master a large portion of your life. You can become very effective.
So to people like Sam, I would say, so I think, first of all, I think Sam and everybody else is actually what I call a behavioral compatibilist. So now, ontologically speaking, I can't, I don't think I can defeat a determinist absolutely. neither can Dan Dennett. He's a better philosopher than I am. But that we don't live in that world. We walk around in the world and make choices. Like, I'm going to go left instead of right. I'm going to look before I blow through the stop sign on my bike or whatever. I assume I have some active role in how things turn out as I go through my life path moment by moment. Nobody walks around like, well, it's determined, so fuck it, I'm just gonna just blindly walk along.
Or just self-restriction. Sometimes you really want something and you know it's not good for you, and you don't do it even though it really sucks. I mean, there is that.
Now a better counter argument that to a determinist like Sam, I would say, what's the difference between you and I, who are not drug addicts, and the person who is under the sway of fentanyl and oxycodone or any of these kinds of drugs? Clearly, there are people that can't break the cycle. They just can't, and it's a huge problem. So they're determined, and you and I are determined. What's the difference? They're more determined.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the word we're going to use? So Dan Dennett uses this phrase, degrees of freedom. So the addict has fewer degrees of freedom than you and I, who are not addicts. So, but call it whatever you will. They're more determined, less determined, but something is going on there that we can have some say over or not, depending on those degrees of freedom.
Yeah.
But isn't there also an emotional appeal to that kind of determinism?
Well, it's certainly more relaxing.
Well, but
it takes responsibility away from me.
But in the same way, I mean,
that I can't control it. So
but it's also there's a certainty, and in a time of uncertainty,
it's a form of manifest destiny. I think.
Yeah, and also I had these ideas when I was 12, right? Like you imagine the universe as a closed box. There's everything is operating within there, and therefore everything's going to play out in a particular way. And then you sit around, and I mean, to me, what's most useful is William James's pragmatism. Okay, I can believe that the universe is a closed box and I can't control anything, but what does that cause me to do on a day-by-day basis? Well, it causes me to feel like I have no choice or no agency. So whether it's true or not, right? I'm not smart enough to know what every atom in the universe is doing. It's not a particularly useful way to live.
That's right. And no one does or ever will know what every atom is doing. Okay, so we act as if we hit. So it's a useful fiction. To act as if we have free will, because in effect, you are making choices.
You're right.
Yeah.
And that's
I think, Sam, that's right. I think that that's a really good point, because there are a lot of useful fictions, man. There are a lot, and they are real. And All Men Are Created Equal is a useful fiction. Yeah. It's a useful fiction.
And what science is about, and what this protopian way of thinking is about, is incrementally more useful fictions. That's where, if you conceptualize. Well,
science is a little bit different than.
Well, Harari makes this point about money and democracy.
Yeah.
These aren't real things.
Right.
The money we have is just
an agreed
money
upon.
From the government.
It's agreed upon. Yeah,
that's it. So that's a kind of a useful fiction that works.
Very much so.
Maybe this is what Jordan Peterson means by his version of truth. It's true because we agree that it's true for now. It's not true in some ontological universal sense. So my latest column in Scientific American, let me tell you about this. It just came out. It's called Alvy's Error. Alvy is Alvy Singer, Woody Allen's character in Annie Hall. So remember the early scene where he's a flashback as a young boy. He won't do his homework. His mother takes him to the psychiatrist. Alvy, why won't you do your homework? The universe is expanding. The universe is everything there is, and it's expanding. It's all going to blow up one day. So what's the point?
That's great.
His mother yells at him, "We don't live in the universe. We live in Brooklyn. And Brooklyn's not expanding."
So true.
So my point is that we live in Brooklyn. It doesn't matter what the universe is going to happen in 15 billion years, whether there's an afterlife or not, even whether there's a God or free will. None of that matters. We live in this world here.
I agree.
And we act as if we have choices, and we interact with each other in ways that we can affect each other. So that's why I like Dick Thaler and Cass Sunstein's idea, what they call libertarian paternalism. So this is where you have a choice architecture. My favorite example is the difference between California and Oregon on organ donations. So in California, you have to punch the little button and put the little tab on your driver's license that if you find me dead, you can harvest my organs. But if the button is not there, you're just going to be cremated or whatever. In Oregon, you will be given your organs unless you punch the button and opt out. So they have a much higher rate of organ donations than we do, simply by the choice architecture, opt in or opt out. So Sunstein and Thaler talk about, this is all of society is structured in a way that we're already giving up lots of freedom. So we're making choices, and so give people a range of choices that's going to kind of nudge them. Thaler calls this nudge them in the right direction. Again, I know future Michael Shermer is going to want a chocolate chip cookie in about 6 hours, so I can I can avert that by having some healthy snacks before that, so I don't go for that. And all of life is that.
Yeah.
So why not do it in a rational way?
Yeah.
Structures. We're already giving up freedoms anyway. Drive on the right side of the road instead of whatever you want.
And I think that I think part of it is also is what do we mean by the word rational? Because, you know, that word gets thrown around a lot by a lot of people. And as far as I can tell, there's rational in terms of reasonable, right? Which is, you know, there are things that I see, I'm confronted with evidence that don't reflect how I feel or what my current opinion is. And then I'm willing to change my mind in light of that evidence. There's rational in terms of rationalizing, where I'm able to give reasons for why I'm doing what I'm doing. And then there's rational in the sense of logical, where I break everything down into individual components. If A, then B, if B, then C.
Right.
So these are three different modes of cognition that are all being bucketed together under the word rational. And there's a place for each mode of cognition, but very often, like if you think about, for example, these sort of utopias that turn into dystopias, they started from some logical assumption, and then they went if A, then B, if B, then C.
Right.
And then if you just follow that chain of logic to the end of the line, you end up with,
a bunch of
we got to
graves.
kill the
With a bunch of
intellectuals.
graves.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
right, though.
Yeah,
You're so right about that. That's a really, really important
Yeah, that's a good
point. I do
heuristic
think
way
that
of putting
also
it.
you have to look at like going back to the cognition, the methodology of reason or logic. You know, Jordan Peterson said that if you have a society that's structured around the male, the biggest, strongest male with the biggest club, and he rules, those societies end up not being very stable.
Right. No.
And then when you look at the longest running democracy, like what the Constitution has given us and the Founding Fathers, that would logically probably be a good thing to mimic, a good thing to imitate. It's probably the closest we can come to something called a liberal democracy. Now, I think, again, that has its own trappings. I think the new religion, again, this is Yuval Harari, not me, but I've been thinking about it actually before I read the book, is this idea of sort of my feelings, my autonomy, my sensibilities cannot be trampled on because this is how I define myself and this is how I see the world, and that's sacred.
Right.
Well, no, it ain't. No, it ain't.
Right.
You know, Rogan does this funny thing about, and I think it's already been done, but he does this funny thing about Caitlyn Jenner. Caitlyn Jenner has a right to be a woman. You know, Bruce Jenner has a right to become a woman. Doesn't mean you're beautiful. I don't agree. He goes, you're not beautiful. And you know who else isn't? This guy. And he points at himself and he goes, I look like a thumb with two thumbs. It's a great fucking joke. And it's true. Yes. And it's true. You're not allowed to invent your own fucking reality and your own. No, you're not. You're a 65-year-old woman now, and that's not attractive to me. Anyway.
Well, and also I think part of the big problem is that any virtue pursued to the logical conclusion becomes a vice.
Any what?
Any virtue pursued to the end is a vice.
Extremism. Yeah, that's right. Extremism leads can not always, but can lead to.
And even
like that.
one of the things that I really liked about your conversation with Chris Ryan is you talked about why you no longer refer to yourself as a libertarian.
Yeah, the labels. See, the labels are just packed with other stuff. Just ask me what I think about abortion, gun control, whatever. But once you have the label, then you're not even thinking about me anymore. You just think, oh, those libertarians or whatever. Classical liberal, I like that. That's an old term that's been making something of a comeback. Dave Rubin's got a T-shirt. I bought one of his T-shirts. It's like, okay, that's cool. Let's see if we can get a good meme going here.
Yeah.
Just because, you know, the politics is so splintered now. I mean, conservative, Republican, what does that even mean in the age of Trump anymore? And then Democrats, between Bernie and Hillary, well, what is that? You know, okay, we need and we know from surveys over the last 25 years that the center, you know, the undecided voters, the independents, that's getting smaller and more people are migrating further and further out. So it is becoming more polarized.
Well, I think the biggest threat is a lack of purpose and a lack of national narrative. I mean, sometimes I worry about that. We can't even agree on whether or not our sources are the right. I mean, if I have an argument, you go, where'd you get your sources from?
Yeah.
Fox News or CNN? And that's a problem. Again,
I'm encouraged by the fact-checking sites like PolitiFact and Snopes and a few others that, you know, they actually gain some cred and clicks by real-time fact-checking the president or whoever politician's speeches. So that's a solution. That's a market kind of bottom-up.
Yeah, because I think human beings want the truth, right? They you know, if you said to somebody, "Do you want to be fooled? Do you want the real truth?"
Right.
Conspiracy theorists think they're getting to the real truth. You know, I mean, everybody.
Well, I think, and that gets to one of the other solutions is for us all to read Michael Shermer's books.
Yeah.
Because the reality
I
is,
wouldn't object to that.
Buy the books.
No, because I mean, the point
Heavens on
is
earth.
that everybody's got their story now. And so we all essentially have to be journalists. We have to be scientists. We have to be skeptics and constantly be questioning whatever narrative. And the problem with conspiracy theorists is that they're not skeptical enough of their own thinking.
That's right.
Well,
And
this is why you got to get out of your bubble. You know, if you're in the Alex Jones bubble, you know, everything is a conspiracy.
Jesus.
And, you know, if everything is conspiracy, then it's all meaningless. Then nothing is a conspiracy. We have to be able to discriminate. And the only way to find that out, you can't, in your heuristic of the different kinds of rationality, the rationalization, confirmation bias and all that, huge problem. So I got to talk to you and you and you and so on and say, look, I got this idea. Have I gone off the rails? Does this make any sense? What do you think? You know, and if
That's what scientists do. Can you
that's right.
recreate this? You know,
So the idea of a consensus, like climate consensus, what does this mean? I mean, it's not a democracy. It's not like they meet and vote. It's that, you know, that the majority of papers all point to this one conclusion. Now, if they were split and divided here and there, that would tell us, well, there's no consensus. But if they all point in the one direction, there's a consensus. Now, the whole consensus might be wrong. That has happened. But it becomes less likely the more years that roll by and the more evidence piles up.
But do you, I mean, you know, so there's obviously problems with in the term of libertarian, right? Like you don't identify with anarcho-capitalists. It doesn't fit my reading. It doesn't fit my reading of Adam Smith or any of the economic literature.
Those guys, the founding fathers and all those Enlightenment thinkers, they were really early evolutionary psychologists, cognitive psychologists. Now, none of that existed at the time, but they had a sense of human nature. Like, you know what? People are greedy and they can be really nasty. We have some inner demons there. We better design a system that keeps that in check. The nicest guy in the world, you give him all this power, he may not be nice. So we better do something to, you know, to prevent that from happening. Those guys were very smart.
They really were, man.
And what you've said there is so important. Like you mentioned Matt Ridley earlier, and we had him on the podcast, and his book, The Evolution of Everything, he has this great line in there, which is that capitalism is a special case of evolution. And that's really what the free market is. It's an evolutionary process. And
well, I'm a kind of reformed libertarian. I used to love to, because I went through as a young man, of course, Ayn Rand, and Milton Friedman, and F.A. Hayek, and I love the libertarian idea. I love small government, and I like the idea of self-reliance. And I think there's a lot of value in a marketplace. Of course, I live in it, and I've had to compete in it my whole life. But yes, there is a place for government. There is a place for the Pure Food Act and for safety on the highways and all that. And I know there are a lot of people that would disagree with that, but then you get Somalia. And,
exactly.
I'm saying? So come on.
Or just
or gangs that take over and things like that. Or companies that get so powerful that they squash and gobble up all competition. And I don't care what anybody says. It's just a fact.
Right.
You can see it, man. We just we're talking. We had Andrew Keene on the podcast. He wrote a book called How to Fix the Future and The Cult of the Amateur. He talks about the internet and the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse: Google and Amazon and Apple and Facebook.
Right.
Well, they are our information platforms. You know?
Yes, I know. I'm concerned about that. I really wish someone like an Elon Musk or maybe Peter Thiel would start a competitor for YouTube.
It's happening. Well, there are the marketplaces coming up with. They're starting to see that people don't trust their news. Right. And so there are sites that are coming up with, and there's technology that's coming up with a way to make sure that you know who is looking at your data and who's selling it.
Yes.
There's all that stuff. So
but
I'm optimistic.
I mean, in terms of free will, there are things that as individuals we can choose to do, like be mixed mental artists and move between echo chambers, right? And I think, that's really what our responsibility as a citizen is. Okay, great. Your story makes sense to you. That tells you absolutely nothing. People's stories always make sense to them. That's naive realism. What are the other side saying? What's this group saying? And if you move between enough of them, like yesterday, I love to go to Russia Today. It's amazing because you get to see the mirror image of history. If you go to Russia Today,
how good is your Russian?
It's okay. It could use some work. I will have to be brushing it up.
You do?
He literally speaks about 8 languages.
I just went to Moscow 2 months ago for the first time. It was quite the experience.
Totally different view of history, totally different view of the world.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that's what the experience of moving. I mean, we grew up all over the world. The experience of moving between lots of cultures is you're like, wait a minute, like they have a whole different story.
Right.
And
yep, travel is good. Travel is very good for perspective, exposure to different cultures. That's why free speech is so fundamental. You got to talk to other people. You got to be exposed to other ideas. This is why dictators, one of the first things they do is squelch the press and free speech and lock people up, and dissenters got to go. And that's why they have these purges. That's why all moral groups have purges, because it's like if there's dissent, then I might have to change my mind, and maybe I was wrong and I don't want to be wrong. And
But I feel like dissent now, even reasoned dissent, can cost you your job, your livelihood, and everything else.
That's not good.
Corporations are terrified to be moderate.
But that also is why the podcast space is such a good space, because it really comes down to what are your incentives, right? And some podcasts are based on sort of validating people's preconceived notions. But, we've lined our incentives up to constantly questioning our own narratives. So we're incentivized to be challenged. And then there are people who will gravitate towards that space. And, that's where an evolutionary system, the free market, can really do good work.
Yep. Well, one of the other things that tempered my libertarianism was in sports, just the amount of like doping in cycling, and then all the other sports as well. And it's like, okay, these guys are of course they're gonna cheat if they can.
They'll go to and pro athletes will tell you they'll eat shit if they have to. It means they'll get across that finish line before you do.
Yeah, that's right. So you got to have rules. Absolutely, they got to be enforced, strongly, fairly, justly, and so on.
What do we do about that? Because I've thought about this with sports. You can pass these laws and you can even make them draconian, but technology is moving quickly.
Yes.
I mean, gene doping and all that shit. We're going to have preternaturally fast.
I know. I'm almost to the point of just saying, if I could just let these guys do whatever they want. But the problem is, even if you had it regulated, every team had, doping doctors, and there was like a committee that oversaw the doping doctors. Somebody's going to, so if my hematocrit is at 50%, and we put the limit there, then 51% is going to be just a little bit better. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you're up into the 60% and 65% or so, you're going to have strokes and heart attacks. So it's like, okay, what's going to prevent that?
Or you're not, or you're going to figure out a way to push so far beyond. We are pushing way beyond our biology.
Right.
We already are doing it with nanotechnology and everything else. So,
I mean, here the Olympics are starting on Friday, and I have no idea what I'm going to be watching. It's like, I just assume they're all doped to the hilt.
Yeah.
After Icarus, it's like, look what the Russians did. I mean, to call Lance Armstrong, the most sophisticated doping program, he was an amateur compared to these guys. Oh my God.
Yeah. I know a lot of pro athletes, and I've had some pretty candid conversations.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you have underlying genetic variation, right? Like it's not a level playing field because different people have different gene makeups.
Yeah.
And so if you could tweak that,
And, if the reality is if you've got two athletes, one is born with a set of genes that set them up to succeed and one doesn't have that same advantage, well, wouldn't you be just leveling the playing field by allowing them to change their genes?
That's right.
So it's but I mean, that's the reality of regulation, right? You have to think through
the
all of these
handicapper
different...
general.
Yeah, exactly.
Michael, is there a book that you is there any depiction of the future that you find to be probably the most probable?
Most probable. Well, the last chapter of my previous book, The Moral Arc, I kind of speculate again that protopia. Let's just incrementally go. I'm not. If you look long enough, I'm not convinced the nation state will last all that much longer.
Really?
It's sort of because if you look like 10,000 years of civilization, the nation state is only really since the Treaty of Westphalia. So we're talking a couple hundred years, maybe a couple hundred years more, and then. We already have pretty good open trade borders.
Yeah.
Although there's some pushback against that now, but that
cryptocurrency.
Cryptocurrency. This will probably happen. And so once the economic borders are totally porous, then why not the political borders? Just let people live wherever they want. Let Mexicans come here until their jobs are all filled, then they won't come here. I mean, it's just economic incentives.
There's that school of thought.
So what do we need borders for in the first place? This whole idea of nation states, it's pretty new. We're so used to it, we just think of it's forever, but no.
Isn't nationalism in our genes, though? I mean, Americans...
Tribalism.
Tribal and xenophobia and all that. But open borders and trade and travel and all that breaks down those natural tendencies.
But also, especially in the 1800s, there was deliberate myth making around the nation state, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Italy is only a few hundred years old. It's basically 100 years old.
That's right. Yeah,
you know,
and Germany also a pretty new country.
Oh yeah, both. Yeah.
And so I think that's one future. Of course, being an interplanetary species, multiplanetary species, is a good idea for lots of reasons. Just in
We're
case
a long way off from that.
I don't know.
Isn't Mars 40 light years away or something crazy? Or
what? Mars? No. Elon thinks he can get 100 people there in
Brian, that's
6
because
months.
when you look at Mars, you're squinting, and so it looks farther away than
how
it
far
actually
away is Mars?
is.
I thought Mars was literally like so much farther than we thought.
No.
Are you sure?
No. Yeah.
Maybe you're thinking of Alpha Centauri or something.
Now the nearest stars are
light years away.
Oh, well, actually, we put a rover on Mars already. So why?
Multiple times.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so now the nearest stars are too far away to do anything until we have some kind of new propulsion systems. Now, Sagan did this calculation back in the 60s, where if you can accelerate a spacecraft at 1G, so it's constantly accelerating at 1G. So 1G is what we have right here sitting here. And so basically the back of the spacecraft is the floor that you're on. Or you can spin it like in 2001, where that becomes your 1G gravity. And you can then get to essentially the center of the galaxy, tens of thousands of light years away within a human lifespan. Now, that's in the spacecraft.
Right.
The humans back on Earth will be long dead and gone.
Yep.
But because of relativity and the contraction of time, within our little spacecraft, then accelerating at 1G, we could explore the entire galaxy in a human lifespan. Everyone on Earth will be dead and gone, but that's a different problem. So this is doable, sort of in science fiction.
Mars is 34 million miles away.
Yeah, Brian.
That's nothing.
That's nothing. I mean, Elon just put a red Tesla in orbit around the sun. I mean,
amazing.
Yeah, it's just in our own lifetime. It's stunning what we're capable of doing. I mean, just in the 90s, it was like, even GM can't produce a viable electric car, so forget it. It's never going to happen. And then boom, here we are. Now every car will have, within 5 years, all of the GM, Ford, Porsche, BMW, they'll all have Tesla equivalent cars at half the price of a current Tesla.
Yeah.
And within 20 years, everyone will have all this technology, and every car will be on the road like this. That's stunning, in our lifetime.
Things fast. They happen very quickly.
Yeah.
And so maybe it's possible that Kurzweil is right. But the point is that we don't know.
You know what I think about when I think about living to 150? I think about the musical instruments I would try to master. I mean, that's it. I don't know. I guess I'd be in a band. Suddenly I'd get tired of stand-up comedy, and I'd be in a fucking band as a drummer.
Multiple careers.
But as long as I could keep my hair and I didn't, what's the point of being a rock star if you can't be sexy and get laid? I mean, you know what I mean? I mean, honestly, like 150 years. Geez, I don't want to do stand up for that long.
Or 1,000.
How many people can you talk to?
You'd be in your 20s for like a century.
Yeah.
And then your 30s for the next century.
Yeah, so much of your 20s and so much of the bonds that you create and the fun were about your future, about where you were headed and what you were going to be doing and the struggle now, and you're going to arrive. And even now I picture myself, I ultimately want to be a man who wears tweed jackets, and I want to smoke a pipe and pontificate while I swill expensive wines. And I want an English accent. I'm going to move to Spain.
That's all good too. You can have all of that.
Yeah.
You're going to move to Spain
decades.
where they'll be fooled by your English accent?
Yes. I remember when I was talking to Michael Shermer. You remember him, the Sardinian gentleman with the barrel chest and the great smooth legs. Big brain, of course. Don't get me wrong. He was all head. No pun intended.
Oh my God.
I know. This is what you get into. This is what you get yourself into.
This is mixed mental arts. Okay.
Yes, it is.
I like that.
Michael, thanks for joining us, man.
Oh, thanks for having me. No, this is too much fun.
It's really a
I'm very encouraged by the whole podcast thing. I think it is a good challenge and a necessary challenge to so-called mainstream media.
Yeah.
Because those options are there, and more people I think are doing the deep dives. I mentioned that guy I ran into on my bike ride on Tuesday up in Santa Barbara. I just wanted to see how far I could go on Foothill 192 before I hit the mudslide damage and the roads are washed out. They won't let me go anymore. So I pull up there. I got the helmet, the glasses and so on, and jacket. And the flagman goes, "The skeptic guy, I saw you on Joe Rogan." Oh, I'm like,
fantastic.
Here's this dude standing on the side of the road, and he's probably got the earbud in there listening to Rogan or Dave Rubin.
And your ideas and all the books you've read are getting into his brain.
That's right.
Which is what we talk about.
And 10 years ago, this guy he was just standing there bored out of his skull for all day. Now you can listen to not just talk radio with all the commercials, but podcast. And 2 hours, 3 hours of in-depth conversation is great. This could lift culture up.
I was going to say, I feel like it's creating a neural net or creating sort of we are being nudged together, and we are speaking the same language, aren't we? I mean, we really are. No matter what tribe you're in, at least we all agree that you shouldn't kill people for the color of their skin, for the most part, indiscriminately.
Yeah.
Like things like genocide now, at least, are considered to be kind of bad for the most part.
But this also gets to like the Thaddeus's point, which is that truth has always been the greatest tool of the authoritarian.
Yeah.
The authoritarian wants to control the narrative.
That's right.
And now, because of the technology, we can have
no
you
one can
can't
control it.
and that's great. And ultimately, the experience, I think, especially if you read a lot of the scientific literature, is you think you know something, then you encounter a new piece of science. Oh, that gets upended, right? You can encounter and at a certain point, that's how you really become a skeptic, is because suddenly you've had so many of your own religions upended that you're like, hold on a minute here. Before we like really go down this rabbit hole, let's see what else there is out there.
Yeah.
I'm encouraged by all that. I mean, we focused on the Kim family running North Korea for half a century, but really them and Putin and maybe one or two others. But 2 centuries ago, every country was run by a maniac like that.
Yeah.
And, almost every. So, now there's just a handful, and we can focus on them and, crank up the economic sanctions, do what we can. And pretty soon they'll all be gone. No one can live.
I was thinking about that. Even in our lifetime, I mean, most of Latin America were military dictatorships.
That's right. Yeah.
And now they're democracies.
Right,
I mean, Venezuela is a disaster, but for the most part, you're right. These are the exceptions and not the rule. And monarchies and oligarchies and tyrannies were the rule forever.
Right.
I mean, slavery was the order of the day across
Torture,
the entire spectrum.
Capital punishment. Everybody did it. Now almost nobody does it.
Yeah.
And the big problem for the Kim family is that all this pop culture and all this, other information keeps filtering across the DMZ.
Yeah.
And the more that people are exposed to these other ideas, the more they're going to start to look skeptically at their leaders and be like, I don't know that what you're saying is the truth, is actually the truth.
They already hate that guy.
Yep. And I think Kim may actually want nukes just for the deterrence. He may not be a madman. He may be calculating. He may be thinking, look how America treats countries that have nukes versus those that don't. You know what? I'm going to get a nuke, and then I'm just going to sit here and be, deterrent.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because, well, North Korea suffered very greatly at American hands. I mean, North Korea's I think 80% of their buildings were razed during the Korean War. So they have very fresh memories of wide-scale death. It's just a fact. So that would change the way you think. 3,000 of our citizens were killed in 9/11, and it changed the entire landscape, the cultural landscape. Yep. Americans became unforgiving of anything even that's whiffed of terrorism. Think about what would happen if 80% of our buildings were razed.
Or anything that whiffed of Muslims. Because, I mean, this is, again, how human minds work, right? Negativity bias. Yeah. You have 3,000 people die. The mind exaggerates that. And then, we create these broad categories of Muslims or Americans or
I've never been a big fan of Bill Maher. I think he's a bit of a blowhard, and he thinks he's way smarter than he is and a lot funnier than he is. But he did say something good, and probably wasn't even his idea. But terrorism is what you have to worry about. Americans are killing themselves with the food they eat, in far larger numbers. Diabetes and heart disease is, way more of a threat. So
well, that's right. In terms of like the top 10 killers, terrorism is not even in the top 50 killers. No. And but that doesn't make the evening news. I mean, they don't. The evening news doesn't cover countries that aren't going through revolutions or people that are living long, healthy lives. They cover bad news. That's their job. That's fine. But let's also remember the headlines along with the trend. Remember the trend lines instead of the headlines.
What's your assessment of the Trump effect on America? And
so far, it hasn't been the catastrophe everybody said it would be. So okay, that's a good. This will be a good test of our republic. All those checks and balances. If in 4 years or 8 years, things are still pretty good. Okay, well. Disaster didn't happen. So, in that sense, it's probably an experiment you wouldn't want to run intentionally, but it's happening. So let's.
And I think it's also shaken a lot of people out of their complacency.
Yes,
which is the real benefit.
Citizenry,
yeah,
has become the thing now. It's galvanized, it's energized people in general to become more involved in.
Yep. Yeah. So that's good. That's all right.
Yep. I think in general,
I think this too shall pass. Adam Smith famously said that someone was talking about the disaster coming, the apocalypse, everything is going to fall apart. He said there's a lot of ruin in a nation. That is a lot of bad things can happen, and it still doesn't collapse.
Yeah,
not to panic.
Yeah,
keep going.
And I think that's also, I mean, part of why your book is so relevant is there have always been these utopian visions, always been these dystopian visions, and then there's the reality of that protopia, of that incremental progress that has always been what the real work is.
Well, to the all the AI apocalypse, robo apocalypse, Y2K. I mean, we all lived through that. Oh, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Well, but we got to do this and that. And then nothing happened. Of course, they said, well, that's because we did something about it. Yeah, but a lot of companies did nothing and still nothing happened.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And, but this one's different. Okay, maybe, but, and then you get that, but just you wait.
Yeah.
The next one's going to do it.
We've always been apocalyptic. We've always been, I mean,
my friend Lawrence Krauss now is head of this doomsday clock, 2 minutes to midnight. He's like, come on.
He is?
Yes.
He did our podcast.
Yeah, I like Lawrence. He's a great guy. But, come on, really. I mean, things are worse than they've ever been all the way back to the 50s. I mean,
is that what he said?
Oh, yeah. We're on the verge of, it's all about to, collapse.
Because of what? Because of...
because of
because of AI and all that?
No,
because that's the new thing. Right?
They're mainly focused on nukes and global climate change. Okay, again, I don't agree with this, but to say that things are no better in terms of foreign relations and nuclear weapons than they were in the 1950s,
that's crazy.
That's crazy. I mean, it's way better. There's more countries have started and stopped nuclear programs than have started and succeeded in creating. There's only 9 countries that have them out of the 182 countries.
Wow.
And, there was, in 1987, the peak was, I think, 70,000 nuclear weapons. Now we're less, it's about 10% of that. We're down to about 7,000 nuclear weapons now. That's still enough to cause, catastrophe for sure.
But it's progress.
But, there's now a taboo on using them. I mean, no one wants to use them. Now, no one's committed to no first use.
Yeah.
That would be a big step, no first use. And also no launch on warning because of the errors that can happen. Launch on warning, LOW, is a scary thing.
Yeah.
It turns out it's a flock of geese or something.
Or what happened in Hawaii.
Or what happened in Hawaii. Yeah. I don't know why that guy got fired. I mean, it's like, that's your job, is to be hyper alert, because what if it was real?
Yeah.
Okay. So that was kind of unfair and unfortunate.
Right.
But that great book by Eric Schlosser, Command and Control.
I was going to say Command and
Control.
And
my friend Robbie Kenner, the documentary filmmaker, he did Food Inc. And he did that one on climate denial. But his new one is, he made a film out of that. It is scary. These guys are up there working, tinkering around with some big tools, and the tool falls and bangs against the side and punctures a hole in the rocket.
There's a podcast about that.
There is.
I think Radiolab did that. Where it blew, where this warhead could kill 20 million people. It was sitting on a massive thing of jet fuel, and it blew, and they found it a quarter mile away in a ditch. Didn't go off though.
Yeah, it didn't go off. So there's a whole bunch of those, and it's like, whew, oh man. Yeah. Okay, we really got to keep working toward nuclear zero.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, there it is.
All right, gentlemen.
Michael Shermer, thank you so much, man. What a great time.
I love this. What a great show.
Oh, dude, you're always welcome. This has been such a treat.
I'm coming back.
Are you gonna bike out of here? Or?
I'm biking. I got to teach this afternoon, so I got to.
Where do you teach?
Oh, this semester at Chapman, I'm teaching an honors course, Evolution, Ethics, and Morality. So it's
good to be Michael Shermer.
All the big questions.
Good to be the Sardinian.
That is officially your nickname, by the way.
I had no idea it was a Sardinian, but I will wear it as a badge of honor.
Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Shermer.
Thank you.
And the book is Heaven is on Earth. That's the new book, and it's a great book. So read it or die.
And we'd love to have you back on the show.
Read it or die. I might use that.
Hey, guys, thanks so much for watching. Now, it's important that you subscribe to YouTube, because we want to get a lot of viewers, and then we can use YouTube's office. We're not making any money, but we'll use YouTube's office. Now do it! Go like that. I never do this, by the way, ever, but you should.
But Bryan, will you subscribe to our YouTube channel?
I haven't done that yet.
Yeah, but you're going to.
Yeah, I'm going to. I haven't even done it, but you do it. Do as I say, not as I do.
Inspire Bryan to do it.
Yeah, and then I'll do it.